I was raised by the Smith family to be their future daughter-in-law. At 20, I married Jason Smith. At 24, I gave birth to Carlos Smith. Carlos took after Jason, quiet, distant, and never very close to me. Every night, I would bring them each a warm glass of milk before bed. But that night, Jason accidentally knocked over the glass, and Carlos secretly poured his out. Suddenly, I felt tired. When I handed Jason the divorce papers, he frowned and asked, annoyed, "All because of this?" "Yes, just because of this." "And what about our son? What are you planning to do with Carlos?" Jason asked, back to his usual cold, businesslike tone. I sat across from him, like a guest at a negotiation table, and calmly said, "I'll give up custody. The house in the eastern suburbs will be transferred to his name. Consider it compensation for child support. After all, the boy's last name is Smith. He fits more naturally with Jason than with me." Jason lowered his gaze, his eyes unreadable, as if he couldn't understand why I was making such a fuss. "Jennifer," he softened his voice, "if you can't let go of what happened with the milk, I'm sorry. You know I was drunk last night. I didn't mean to treat you like that." He was patient, still convinced the milk was the problem. Jason had come home late from a business dinner. I waited up for him half the night, only waking when the cold air swept in as he opened the door. I got up from the couch and saw him rubbing his forehead while taking off his coat, clearly unwell. I hurried to the kitchen to bring him the warm milk I had prepared. We never had a perfect marriage, but at least we kept up appearances. That night, I asked a little more than usual, "Did you see someone? Your cologne smells familiar." Jason suddenly let go of the glass. I didn't react in time. The glass slipped from our touching fingers and shattered on the floor, breaking the peace under the soft glow of the lights. Jason's face turned cold and irritated. He looked at me and warned, "Jennifer, you crossed a line. Don't wait up for me anymore, and stop preparing milk at night." Then Carlos, seeing how his father reacted, secretly poured out his milk too. I caught him. He stood at the doorway and said without emotion, "Sorry, Mum. If Dad doesn't drink it, I don't want to either." In their eyes, it was such a trivial thing. I shouldn't have made a scene over it, so I didn't explain further. I signed the papers, hired a lawyer, and chose to end my marriage with Jason. Jason spoke indifferently about splitting assets. I wasn't really listening or interested. As I packed my things, he looked me over and said, "Jennifer, the process takes time. No need to move out so quickly. You can keep the house." I glanced at this calm, indifferent man and replied with his own words, "It's better to keep things clean and simple. Avoid messy loose ends." Jason said nothing after that. I never thought packing could be this hard. The house was filled with little things I'd arranged over the years. I looked around once and decided to keep it simple. Just dragged my suitcase toward the door. Jason stopped me. "Where are you going? Back to your parents?" he asked. "I'll have the driver take you." "No need," I said. "Just have the housekeeper clear out my stuff tomorrow. I won't be dealing with it. After all, they never needed me to lift a finger around here." As I stepped out the front door, I paused, then turned back and spoke to Carlos, who stood behind Jason with the same blank expression. "I won't be picking you up from kindergarten anymore. But remember not to go anywhere with strangers." That was my last word to myself. I turned and left, without another glance at the boy I once held through sleepless nights, soothing him through weaning with endless patience. I bought a ticket out of the northern city, picked a random southern town. Ever since I was 14 and told I'd marry into the Smith family, my choices had been taken from me. After marrying Jason, he never took me anywhere unless it was absolutely necessary. Our typical routine? Me waiting up each night, handing them warm milk before bed. Everyone in our social circle said Mrs. Smith raised me well, like I was tailor-made for Jason. A wife that fit his status and managed his life flawlessly. The only flaw? I was too perfect. Boring, even. I once overheard Jason's friends teasing him. "Hey, Jason, What's it like living like an old married couple so young? Your wife's got no personality. Smiles like a mannequin. Want us to hook you up with someone more fun? Just the other day, Juan met this hilarious girl, funny as hell. Kinda like Jessica back in the day. Interested? Jessica, Jason's first love. Mrs. Smith had never approved. Jason fought her on it for years. Then, for reasons I never knew, they broke up. Jessica left for the States. Not long after, Jason suddenly agreed to marry me. He proposed at 20. 4 years later, Carlos was born. Oh, right. I remember now that night. The cologne I smelled on Jason was Jessica's favorite, a custom blend of gardenia. After settling in my new place in the south, I wandered the city. The misty alleys and soft southern rain made everything feel like a dream. On the third morning, Jason called. His voice was hoarse, like he'd just woken up. "Jennifer, where's that pair of ruby cufflinks you bought me at last year's auction?" I paused. "Second drawer in the wardrobe closet." I asked, "What's the occasion?" Jason replied, "A mall ribbon cutting." I said, "The matching suit is the fourth piece on the second rack." He still sounded half asleep. I could hear rustling and some quiet grumbling on the other end. After a moment, I asked, "Did you find it?" Silence. Then finally, "Yeah, sorry to bother you." I just said, "I know." Then I told him, "Have the housekeeper reorganize everything. If you still can't find something, ask them. And please don't call me again." Jason went quiet, then said, "Okay." After hanging up, I blocked his number and went back to sleep. But I couldn't rest. My dreams were wild, vivid. I was 14 again, laughing and playing with classmates at school. I dreamed of that sunny day when I first met Jason at 15, of the pain when I broke my leg at 16 after sneaking out to race and getting caught by my dad. Then, a shrill ringtone pierced the dream. I woke up, annoyed, fumbling for my phone. It was an unfamiliar number, I answered, and a polite voice came through. "Hello, is this Carlos's mom? I'm his kindergarten teacher. We're holding a robotics showcase today, and Carlos is participating, but he didn't bring anything. He said you were the one who helped him prepare. Could you bring it over?" The teacher sounded cheerful. My fingers tightened around the phone as I closed my eyes, feeling an indescribable exhaustion. Not long ago, I had been sitting in the living room, studying video instructions frame by frame to help Carlos build his project. But I had left in such a hurry that day. The robot was still half finished. Staring at the bright sun already high in the sky, I quietly said to the teacher, "I'm sorry, but I no longer have custody of Carlos. I'm not responsible for him anymore. And is he with you right now?" "Ah," the teacher replied awkwardly. "Yes, he is. Carlos is right here next to me." I sighed. "Could you please put me on speaker?" "Of course. No problem. Thank you." There was a rustling sound on the other end, then silence. I knew Carlos could hear me. I spoke softly. "Carlos, the robot's in your toy box at home. You can ask your dad to bring it to you. Or anyone else. But from now on, please don't call me again. I won't come pick you up. I won't help you with your projects. You know this, I'm not your mom anymore." After that, I apologized to the teacher and hung up. Saying those words to the child I had nearly died giving birth to, of course it hurt. I couldn't even remember when Carlos started becoming more and more like Jason. My marriage to Jason had been arranged long ago. When I was 14, my grandfather and father came out of the study, smiling alongside the Smith family elders. From that day on, the Smiths raised me as their future daughter-in-law. Back in school, my classmates envied how privileged I was. I never argued, I could only smile bitterly. Yes, my life was comfortable, but I had no freedom. When I failed my high school entrance exam, my mom got so angry in the middle of the night she stormed into my room, dragged me up, and slapped me across the face. In high school, I rebelled and fell in love too young. My dad followed up with another slap and told me if I didn't want to marry into the Smiths, The alternative was marrying some businessman nearly 20 years older. I first met Jason when I was 15, arranged by both our families. Jason was different back then, a boy who smiled easily, whose emotions were written all over his face. I don't remember much else, just a white shirt under a blue sky and a pair of eyes filled with feeling. Later, I heard he fought with his family over his first love. I admired and envied him. At least he dared to resist, to say no. But it wasn't long before Mrs. Smith visited our house, her smile poised yet apologetic, as she took my mum's hand and said, "Don't worry, we've resolved Jason's situation." I listened from the doorway, feeling disappointed. Of course, I thought. After that, my family began arranging more meetings with Jason. At first, he was distant and cold toward me, but eventually, he started to accept it. Sometimes, he'd even speak to me. I watched him slowly change from a sharp, defiant teenager into a quiet, withdrawn man. The scent of gardenia that used to linger on him faded over time. When I turned 20, and Jason was 24, we were on our way to a gala in City C when a landslide buried our car. Jason and I were trapped together for a whole day and night. The last thing I remembered was his arms shielding me, crushed and bloodied by the collapsing car frame. When I woke up, he proposed in front of both our families. "Jennifer," he asked, "will you be my wife?" I looked at his arm wrapped in white bandages and remembered how, when we were trapped, he'd called my name in panic and said, "Jennifer, don't fall asleep. If you do, you'll never be free again." Something possessed me to place my hand in his. I didn't notice how calm and unreadable his eyes were, like he was simply completing a duty. So, we got married. 4 years later, just like everyone had hoped, we had a child. Carlos was adored by both families from birth. Mrs. Smith insisted he needed the finest education, just like Jason. So he poured out that glass of milk and, just like his father, apologized with the most innocent face while doing what he thought was perfectly justified. I don't know what goes through the minds of that father and son, but a week later, Jason called again, this time from a different number, because I had blocked him. So unlike him, so messy. When I picked up, there was silence. Just as I was about to hang up, Jason's voice came through. "Jennifer," he said my name. "Your parents said you didn't go home. Where are you? Is it the southern city?" He was checking on me. I knew he had the means, but I couldn't explain the rage I felt. For 9 years of marriage, he was cold, distant, we were like strangers under the same roof. And now, in just 2 weeks, he'd called me more times than he had in the past year. Before, I'd text him, "Will you be home for dinner? Are you still in that meeting? Is your stomach hurting again? Should I make you some porridge?" The most he'd reply with was, "Yeah." That was it. All one-sided. And now, as if nothing had happened, his hoarse voice asked me over the phone, "Jennifer, I drank too much at dinner tonight. My stomach's upset. Where did you keep the medicine at home?" Also, Carlos caught a cold from a classmate. He's running a fever, 38 degrees, and he's been whining non-stop. What did you used to do to make him feel better? I was beyond furious. I held it in, trying not to sound like a raving lunatic, and told him slowly, word by word, "Jason, we're divorced. I'm no longer your wife, and I'm not your nanny. Whether your stomach hurts or whether you can find the medicine, that's none of my business. And even if you needed meds, there's no shortage of people to help you. The kid is sick? That's your problem. I'm not a doctor. And I've never seen a father who, in a moment like this, would still be asking the kid's mum what to do. I don't know what it is you're trying to do. Maybe it's regret. Maybe you're just used to being taken care of. But Jason, I don't want to be harsh. We're over. Don't come messing with my life again. Do you understand?" After saying that, I hung up for good, flipped over my phone, pulled out the SIM card, and tossed it into the trash. In this day and age, everything's tied to your sim. I didn't expect Jason and Carlos to keep calling me so often. It wasn't about lingering feelings, just that they'd gotten too used to my presence. I got a new card, took out some cash. I signed up for a scientific expedition as part of a travel group heading to the Northwest. I'd seen the project online before. Back then, Jason said he didn't have time, and our so-called friends laughed. Seriously, Jennifer? With Jason's status, a bargain bin trip like that? Embarrassing. I just smiled and let it go. Back then, I thought it was just a passing idea. The Smith family would never let me run wild like that. Funny how now, it was so easy. When a shackle finally breaks, the bound must start struggling from within. The day we set off, the sky was clear. We traveled mostly by train, the carriages gently swaying the whole way. Every time I sank into those weary dreams, I was slowly rocked awake. The trip followed the Qinghai Gansu loop from Xining to Chaka in Qinghai, then to the Chaka Salt Lake, stopping at Dechaiden, Shaochaiden, and the Ghost City. The Mogao Caves rose straight out of the desert. Crescent Lake shimmered quietly under the night. We reached Dunhuang, crossed Jiayuguan, and passed countless layers of rainbow-colored Dangxia. The expedition team was mostly geologists, quiet types who could talk for hours about a patch of dirt, a blade of grass, or a nameless wildflower. They were unexpectedly funny, sometimes even charming. In that vast, sparsely populated Northwest, I felt an overwhelming sense of life. I can't deny that my privileged background and the years of Smith family grooming had exposed me to a world few could see. I used to think traveling only made sense with family. But now, trekking through Yadan, camping in the desert, eating charred lamb skewers, my body covered in dust, I saw stars brighter than I'd ever imagined. I knew Jason would eventually track my itinerary, but I didn't care. After the Northwest Loop, I stayed in touch with my new friends. After a few days back in the city, we set off again, this time on the Sichuan-Tibet route. When I reached Mount Everest, I suffered intense altitude sickness. My breath was shallow, my head pounding. I truly thought I might die on that mountain. But as the sun hit the snowy peaks, and the team cheered from the summit, I broke down and cried my heart out. Everyone rushed to give me oxygen and sugary drinks. They thought I was just in pain. Hey now, don't cry, girl. You're gonna be fine. Your blood oxygen's coming back up. Don't be scared. We've got you. You're not dying today. Yeah, sis, you're still so young. You've got a long way to go. This is nothing. I couldn't stop sobbing until one of the guys from the Northeast made me laugh through his thick accent. With their help, I stood up from the snow, walking toward the sunlit summit, toward a new life. No matter how many shackles, how steep the climb, I could make it to the top alone, couldn't I? When I got back, I rediscovered some of the things I used to love. Like extreme sports, like racing, like owning a little dog I adored. Before I was engaged to Jason, I was wild and carefree, full of love for all things vibrant. But later, when even my freedom was gone, how could I talk about passion? I got a mixed breed Maltese and named her Dodo. She had soft caramel fur and big, innocent eyes. When she ran, her ears flopped like tiny gas canisters. Dogs are easier than people. Dogs understand what you need. Dogs don't ignore you. When a dog knows you love her, she'll love you back. I saw Jason again in front of my new home. I was just about to walk Dodo when I opened the door and found him standing by the elevator, Carlos at his side, nervously eyeing the dog in my arms. "What are you doing here?" I asked coldly, seated across from Jason. Carlos huddled at the edge of the couch, frowning at Dodo wolfing down her food. Jason studied me for a moment. "Jennifer, you've lost weight." I raised an eyebrow. "Answer the question." "It was our son. He wanted to see you." I couldn't stop him. "Jason," I said, "do you remember what I told you last time? We're divorced. Stop intruding on my life. Don't you understand?" Jason's lips pressed into a tight line. Jennifer, Carlos is still young. He needs his mother. I laughed, picked up the phone, and called building security to escort the father and son out. Carlos refused to leave. He stood at the doorway, staring at me, his mouth opening as if to speak. I held Dodo and didn't look at him once. I slammed the door shut. I knew if I looked back, I'd falter. He was the child I brought into this world in agony, clutching the operating table in tears. I'd held him, loved him, soothed him, spoiled him. His first word was mama. As a baby, Carlos cried with everyone except when he was in my arms. Then, he was calm and sweet. But later, Mrs. Smith claimed I was a poor influence, insisting on raising him with some elite parenting method. A child's development, they said, reflects their home education. He absorbed whatever they told him. As he grew up, he drifted from me. He grew distant, treating me with the same polite detachment as Jason. He called me mother, used formal language. Mother, can you let father teach me instead? Grandma says your education isn't as good as his. Mother, why are you always home? Don't you have hobbies? All my classmates' mums do. Mother, you're too serious, not like Aunt Vivi. She always has fun and interesting ideas. After I told security not to let them in again, Jason changed tactics. Some mornings he'd be waiting outside the gates alone, sitting in the back seat of his Maybach, looking like he hadn't slept all night. When I came out, he'd rush over and hand me a hot breakfast. You never eat in the morning. It's bad for your stomach. Please eat something. Sometimes he brought Carlos, trailing behind me as I walked the dog. I kept my eyes straight, never once looking at them. Neighbors I met during my dog walks occasionally asked who the handsome father and son were. I always answered truthfully, my ex-husband, who still has feelings for someone else, and the child who prefers that woman. They fell silent, then quickly rallied to my side. Every time they saw Jason and Carlos, they would warn me in advance not to go out of sight, out of mind. I smiled and told them it was fine. I stopped caring a long time ago. Jason had always been busy. There were plenty of things at the company demanding his attention. He couldn't possibly keep pestering me forever. I often saw him slumped in the car, exhausted, taking call after call, maybe from work, maybe from the Smith family. After all, he'd taken Carlos out for far too long. Sometimes, Carlos would secretly sneak away from Jason and ask the driver to take him to see me. Then he would follow me silently, taking tiny steps right behind me. I focused on walking Dodo, giving her water, coaxing her to eat treats. Dodo would wag her little tail and bark happily at me. Carlos would just watch, saying nothing, eyes full of frustration. Children aren't as good as adults at hiding their emotions. One time, Dodo ran off too fast, and Carlos couldn't keep up. He fell hard on the stone path and finally burst into tears, red-eyed and whining. Mom, it hurts. He rarely cried. Since he got older this time, he must have been really upset. He lay on the ground, sobbing uncontrollably. I stood there, quietly, without moving, until the bodyguards trailing him rushed forward to pick him up. Back then, whenever Carlos got sick, I would feel just as miserable as he did. But now, my heart was calm. Not a ripple stirred. My life now would not be disrupted by the Smith men. After returning from my travels, I signed up for a racing club just to revisit an old passion. Unexpectedly, I made it into a race selection. Even though I figured I'd be knocked out in the first round, I still trained seriously for a long time. The race was scheduled a week later. I booked a red-eye flight to leave town. That pre-race tension was filled with anticipation yet peace. On the track, the wind tore through the heat. Time froze in the screeching of tires against asphalt. Beneath my racing suit, the sweat clung tight. As I pulled off my helmet and stepped onto the podium, cheers rose from the stands in waves. Runner-up, a result I never expected. As I left with the crowd, Jason stood holding Carlos amidst the sea of people. Carlos clutched a bouquet tightly, guarding it from any passerby who might bump it. The moment he saw me, Jason nodded slightly. A faint smile crept into his eyes. He mouthed 2 words. From his lips, I guessed it was congratulations. Carlos's cheeks were flushed, and he waved excitedly at me. "Mom, you were amazing!" The people around us smiled warmly, but I only felt irritated. I carried my things and kept walking. Jason and Carlos came toward me. "Jennifer, I didn't know you could do this. Why didn't you ever mention it before?" "Mom, you were so cool! When you passed that car, I was so nervous I couldn't even breathe." I ignored them and kept walking. Jason grabbed my hand, lowered his voice, and said, "Jennifer, let's have dinner tonight to celebrate. Carlos really misses you." Carlos looked at me eagerly and tried to push the bouquet into my hand. I pulled away and sidestepped them. "I'm busy. I don't have time." "You two can go without me." Jason had been neglecting his work. Carlos hadn't gone home in days. Eventually, Mrs. Smith came to find me. I looked at this woman who had once chosen me and later distanced herself from me, and I felt an indescribable sorrow. Maybe it was because we were both mothers, or maybe just because we were both women. "Jennifer, I chose you because you were quiet and reserved, a perfect fit for our family. But now, both Jason and Carlos refuse to come home because of you. How is this any different from what happened with Jessica back then? Jennifer, come back. Do it for me. Give Jason another chance." Mrs. Smith was never the domineering type. She always spoke gently and politely. Just like Jason and Carlos always had. I thought, if not for her son and grandson, she would never have swallowed her pride to sit here in my tiny 2-bedroom apartment, asking me to give Jason another chance. But Auntie, Jason doesn't love me. Our marriage wasted 9 years of my life. You chose me because of my family background, not because of who I was. And now, I've fulfilled every expectation. Our families are deeply tied. We're inseparable. I gave birth to Carlos, just like you hoped. He's grown up now. Even without me, the Smiths will raise him well. So maybe now you could give me my freedom back. My father once broke my leg. He once killed the puppy I raised. I was timid and afraid to resist. Later, I married Jason. Their goal was fulfilled. We had Carlos' blood tying us forever. I had no value left. But, most importantly, Auntie, I don't love Jason anymore. My young heart once fluttered at, "Jennifer, if you fall asleep now, you'll never be free again. Will you marry me? Maybe I can give you freedom." But in the end, even the boy who vowed to slay the dragon became one himself, forgetting the promise he'd made so casually. Sigh. Mrs. Smith let out a deep breath and spoke to the air. "Did you hear that, Jason?" Mom tried. Beside her handbag, her phone screen was still lit Jason's name, the call ongoing. That night, Jason appeared at my door. "Jennifer, I still want to try. I know I was wrong. I neglected you. Please, can you give me a chance to make it right? To start over?" I looked at him quietly. "I think I've made myself very clear." Jason ran his hand through his messy hair. He was always meticulous, rarely this disheveled. He wore a charcoal suit, but with a pair of bright blue cufflinks. The contrast was glaring, a serious fashion misstep. I used to pick out every outfit for him myself. But now, all I could think was, when will he leave? Jason looked at me desperately. I love you, Jennifer. I just didn't know how to treasure you. I'd never loved anyone before. I didn't know how. That's why I made you suffer. It wasn't until you left that I realized I can't live without you. It was all my fault. Jennifer, can you give me one more chance? Carlos can't live without you either. He cries for you every day. No one else can calm him down. For his sake, can you not be so cruel? Ah, so now he says he loves me. He says he's never loved anyone and doesn't know how. Back when we were meeting under our family's arrangements, he told me, "Jennifer, there's someone in my heart. You know that, right?" At the time, things were tense between him and the Smiths because of Jessica. After we got married, There were rumors Jessica had a new boyfriend in the US, and that was the first night Jason came home drunk. The next day, Mrs. Smith pressed us about when we'd have a child. Jason laughed and told her that if she swapped my perfume for a custom gardenia scent, he'd agree. Every detail, every moment, carried someone else's shadow. And he has the nerve to say he's never loved anyone? I looked at him coldly. What about Jessica then? Jason froze, like his lie had finally been exposed. He lowered his eyes and said seriously, "There was never a Jessica, Jennifer. It was all fake. I didn't want to follow the family's arrangements, so I made it up. You're the only one I've ever loved from the beginning to now." Ridiculous. I used to wonder, was his neglect, his emotional abuse, rooted in some lingering resentment over Jessica? I know what it feels like to be powerless, but I didn't pity him. After Carlos was born, my feelings for Jason dulled. I numbly, routinely carried out the duties of the Smith family's daughter-in-law. I pinned my hopes on Carlos, wishing there could be someone in this house who shared my blood. In those early days, Carlos was my only comfort. But just 2 years in, that hope became another thorn in my side. Maybe Jason did love me. But not more than his pride, his dignity, or everything else. He was simply used to my care, my all-encompassing attention. In this marriage, for whatever reason, he ignored me, emotionally abused me, and took it for granted that a woman should give everything to the family. None of that will ever change. No one is incapable of love. No one truly doesn't understand it. Realizing what you had only after it's gone isn't love, it's just regret and the absence of someone better. When you're young, it's okay to fall in love with anything. When you're grown, it's okay to let go of anything. Jason, save yourself some dignity. Jason had always been a proud man. He understood what I meant. So the last time I saw him, it was once again at my place. I had just returned from a trip to Xinjiang with a tour group. Summer rains were frequent. After getting soaked a few times and dealing with a lot recently, I inevitably fell sick. When I woke from the haze, aching all over, it was Jason who helped me up. Carlos was leaning against the bed, whispering anxiously, "Mom, are you okay? Does anything hurt? Can Dad and I take you to the hospital?" Jason slipped a pillow behind me and said, "I saw you staggering when you came back at the gate tonight. Something felt off. I followed you upstairs and found you passed out at the door. I had someone give you a fever-reducing shot. How do you feel now? Still uncomfortable?" He asked gently, handing me something with care. A glass cup. A warm, milky white drink. It was a glass of hot milk. "You haven't eaten much. Drink some milk to soothe your stomach." "Jennifer," he called my name softly, in that familiar tone, and began to scold me like he used to. "You can't take care of yourself alone. If it weren't for Carlos and me today, no one would have even known you were sick. Jennifer, come home with us. Let us take care of you." I looked at him, awkwardly delivering that speech, and at Carlos, nodding eagerly beside the bed. I smiled, reached out, and took the milk. Then, a second later, I let go. The glass slipped from my fingers and shattered on the floor. Milk spread across the tiles like a pale tide. I pointed at the mess and said slowly, "Jason, look, once a glass is broken, it can't be mended. And once milk is spilled, it can't be gathered back." And then, just minutes later, my front door was knocked on. A chorus of voices erupted outside. Carlos opened the door, and a loud crowd flooded in. Everyone was carrying bags and packages, surrounding my bed completely. "Oh no, girl. You're sick? I told them not to drag you into that rainforest in the rain, but they wouldn't listen. Hey sis, still feeling bad? I brought the gummies you said you liked. Pop one after the medicine. It'll help with the bitterness." As everyone chatted at once, someone finally noticed the two unfamiliar figures in the room. "Who are these two?" they asked hesitantly. I saw Jason and Carlos stiffen instinctively. So, in the center of all that attention, Through the crowd, I smiled and said, "Doesn't matter. Just a friend and his son. We won't be seeing them again. They'll be leaving soon." After all, Carlos was still a child. He instantly broke down crying by the door, wailing, "I don't want to leave. I want my mum." His shouting startled Dodo, who barked sharply at him. The Smith family's people emerged from the shadows, quickly taking the child away and supporting the man who was stumbling on his feet. Once, we shared the same boat, but spilled water cannot be gathered. The river and sea will no longer rest.